Welcome to today's lesson on Darwin's theory of evolution, where we will explore this groundbreaking concept in evolutionary biology, why it faced challenges, and how it compares to competing hypotheses like that of Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. In today's lesson, we will first look at the key components of Darwin's theory of natural selection. We will then discuss the various challenges and objections it faced at the time of its introduction. Finally, we will examine competing hypotheses, specifically the ideas proposed by Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, and understand how they differ from Darwin's theory. So far, you have had lessons on genetic variation and evolution, which have provided you with a solid understanding of the mechanisms that lead to diversity within species, and how these traits can change over generations. This foundational knowledge is crucial and sets the stage for us to dive deeper into some history of how the modern evolutionary theories that we have come to accept were proposed. Understanding Darwin's theory of natural selection and its comparison to Lamarck's hypothesis advances our biological understanding by clarifying how species adapt and evolve over time. This insight has been a cornerstone of modern biology, influencing fields like genetics, ecology, and conservation. Let's get started. Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species in 1859, proposing the theory of natural selection. Let's recap the key components of Darwin's theory of natural selection as we have learned in the previous lesson. Within any given population, individuals have variations in traits such as size, colour, and speed. Some of these traits are heritable, meaning they can be passed down from parents to offspring. Organisms produce more offspring than can survive. Therefore, there is competition for resources like food, mates, and territory. Individuals with advantageous traits are more likely to survive and reproduce, passing those beneficial traits to the next generation. Over many generations, these advantageous traits become more common, leading to evolution of the species. For example, Darwin observed that finches which ate different types of foods had developed differently shaped beaks, specialized for their purpose. Darwin's theory suggested that nature selects for individuals better adapted to their environment, a process called natural selection. Darwin's ideas caused significant controversy for several reasons. Firstly, at the time, many believed that God created all species in their present form, whereas Darwin's theory suggested that species could change and were not immutable. Secondly, Darwin could observe the effects of natural selection, but couldn't explain the underlying mechanisms, as genes and DNA were not yet discovered. Thirdly, there was limited empirical evidence to support his theory initially, making it difficult for some scientists to accept. Jean-Baptiste Lamarck proposed an alternative theory around the same time. Here are the principal ideas. Lamarck believed that traits could be developed or diminished based on their usage. If an animal used a particular organ more frequently, that organ would become stronger and more developed. He suggested that traits acquired during an organism's lifetime could be passed to its offspring. For example, giraffes developed long necks because their ancestors had stretched their necks to reach higher leaves, and this acquired trait was inherited by the next generation. Lamarck's hypothesis was widely accepted during his time but was later discredited due to a failure in experiments. Experiments didn't support the inheritance of acquired traits. For example, if a parent loses a limb, this trait is not passed on to their children. Furthermore, the discovery of genetics later confirmed that traits are passed down through DNA, and acquired traits, like muscles built from exercise, do not alter an organism's genetic code in a way that can be inherited. Over time, Darwin's theory gained support due to modern evidence, such as genetic research. The discovery of DNA and genes explain how traits are inherited and mutations cause variations. Fossils also provided evidence of how species have changed over millions of years. In addition, instances of observed evolution, such as antibiotic resistance in bacteria, demonstrated natural selection at work. We will discuss this evidence further in future lessons. Let's look at some additional knowledge about Charles Darwin's theory and how his observations of pigeons influenced it.
You may find it surprising that I was deeply fascinated by pigeons. At the time, they were rather fashionable. In 1856, I began studying and breeding them, and this fascination remained with me throughout my life. By selectively breeding pigeons, I was able to create distinct varieties in just a few generations. Observing these changes firsthand helped me grasp how small variations could accumulate over time in nature, eventually giving rise to the incredible diversity of life we observe today. These humble pigeons played an unexpectedly vital role in shaping my understanding of evolution through natural selection.
In today's lesson, we delved into Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection and discussed why it faced challenges during its inception. According to Darwin, organisms with advantageous traits are more likely to survive and reproduce, passing those traits on to subsequent generations. Over time, this process results in the evolution of species. We also addressed why Darwin's theory was initially met with skepticism and opposition. The scientific community lacked the extensive fossil records and genetic evidence that we have today, making Darwin's ideas seem controversial and unsupported at the time. Next, we explored competing hypotheses to Darwin's theory, particularly those proposed by Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. Lamarck's hypothesis suggested that organisms could acquire traits during their lifetime through use, and then pass those acquired traits onto their offspring. Lamarck's theory was eventually discredited due to lack of evidence supporting the inheritance of acquired traits. By understanding both Darwin's theory of natural selection and the competing hypotheses, we grasp how scientific theories evolve through questioning, testing, and accumulating evidence. This lesson provides a foundation for understanding the mechanisms of evolution and the historical context in which these ideas developed.